Welcome to the Villa Savoye, France. Imagine a house that looks like a floating white box in the countryside of France. At first glance, it seems simple, almost plain. But this house, Villa Savoye, completely changed the world of architecture. Built in 1931 by the visionary architect Le Corbusier, became a symbol of modern life and a model for countless buildings around the globe. Today, let's explore every detail of this extraordinary house. Its history, design, problems, near destruction, and its lasting legacy. Villa Savoye began as a commission from a wealthy couple, Pierre and Eugénie Savoye. They wanted a weekend retreat just outside Paris. They turned to Le Corbusier, one of the most radical architects of his time. For him, this was not just a chance to design a home, but a chance to prove his bold ideas. Le Corbusier believed that houses should be machines for living in. He wanted to show that architecture could be functional, efficient, and beautiful, just like the machines of the modern age 5 points of architecture. These principles were revolutionary. First, Pilates thin concrete columns that lift the house off the ground, making it look like it floats. Second, the free floor plan, where walls don't carry weight so rooms can be arranged however the owner wants. Third, the free facade, meaning the outer walls can be designed freely without supporting the structure. Fourth, ribbon windows, long horizontal strips of glass that flood rooms with light. And fifth, the roof garden, turning flat rooftops into green living spaces. These ideas would spread worldwide and define modern architecture. The villa is a perfect square, about 27 meters on each side, appearing like a white cube in the middle of the countryside. But Le Corbusier didn't just design a building, he designed an experience. Visitors enter under the floating structure, move through a curving driveway into the garage, and then rise gently up a ramp to the main floor. This was deliberate. He wanted movement through the house to feel like a cinematic journey, with carefully framed views at every step. Inside, spaces are open, filled with light, connected to the outdoors. Le Corbusier used reinforced concrete and steel, modern materials that allowed large windows and open spaces. The walls were painted white, reflecting purity and simplicity. Interiors were minimalist, built-in furniture, clean lines, and touches of bright colors. The ribbon windows stretched across walls, offering panoramic views of the trees and fields. The roof terrace provided sunlight, fresh air, and privacy. Every detail was designed to serve function, beauty, and modern living for all its brilliance. Villa Savoye had flaws. Most famously, the flat roof leaked. Rainwater entered the walls and ceilings, frustrating the Savoye family. Madame Savoye even wrote angry letters to Le Corbusier. Repairs were attempted, but the leaks never stopped. Over time, the family grew tired of the problems and stopped using the house regularly. Critics argued that while the villa was beautiful in theory, it failed as a comfortable family home. This raised questions about whether design purity should matter more than practical living needs. During World War II, Villa Savoye suffered greatly. The German army used it, then the Allies occupied it. Bombing nearby damaged the structure. After the war, the house stood neglected, even used by local farmers as a barn for hay. For a building considered a masterpiece today, this was almost unthinkable. By the 1950s, it was so decayed that the town of Poissy even considered demolishing it to build a school. The world almost lost Villa Savoye forever. Thankfully, architects and historians around the world recognized its importance. They fought to preserve it. In 1965, the French government stepped in and declared Villa Savoye a historic monument. This was groundbreaking. It was one of the first modern buildings to receive such status. Restoration work began, and over the next decades, teams repaired the structure, fixed the concrete, and brought it back to its original design. By the 1990s, Villa Savoye was fully restored and open to the public as a museum. Villa Savoye is more than a house. It is a symbol of modern architecture, a textbook in concrete. It inspired countless architects worldwide. The clean white cube, the floating Pilates, and the ribbon windows became the language of modernism. You can see its influence in skyscrapers, glass houses, and even everyday apartment buildings.
For students of architecture, it remains a pilgrimage site, a place to study the principles of design that shaped the 20th century. Still, Villa Savoye sparks debate. Some see it as a perfect work of art. Others argue it ignored the needs of its owners. Le Corbusier's dream of a machine for living sometimes clashed with real life. Yet maybe that is its greatest lesson. Architecture is not just about shelter. It is about ideas, experiments, and visions of the future. Even with leaks and flaws, Villa Savoye succeeded in changing the way we think about houses. Villa Savoye. Standing quietly in the green landscape of Poissy, just outside Paris, France, is not only a house, but a turning point in the history of modern architecture. A building that looks like a simple white box raised on thin columns, yet contains within its walls a story of vision, philosophy, innovation, controversy, near destruction, and lasting influence that stretches across the entire 20th century and beyond. Designed between 1928 and 1931 by the Swiss-French architect Charles-Édouard Jeanneret, better known as Le Corbusier, along with his cousin Pierre Jeanneret. Villa Savoye was commissioned by Pierre and Eugénie Savoye, a wealthy couple from Paris who wanted a weekend country retreat, and what they received was not just a private residence, but a built manifesto of Le Corbusier's revolutionary ideas about how homes should be designed in the modern industrial age, ideas that he summed up in his famous phrase, "A house is a machine for living in." Meaning not that homes should be cold or mechanical, but that they should be as functional, efficient, and rational as cars, airplanes, and ships. Designed to serve their occupants with clarity, light, air, and order, the villa embodied what Le Corbusier called his 5 points of a new architecture, a system that would go on to shape countless buildings around the world. And these points were expressed with perfect clarity at Poissy. First, the use of slender pilates or columns, which lifted the main body of the house off the ground so the landscape could flow beneath it and the building appear to float like a weightless white box. Second, the idea of a free plan, meaning that internal walls no longer had to support the structure and could be arranged freely to suit function, thanks to the reinforced concrete frame. Third, the free facade, which allowed the exterior walls to be designed independently of structure and opened the way for large stretches of windows. Fourth, the use of ribbon windows, long horizontal bands of glass that let in continuous light and gave panoramic views of the French countryside. And fifth, the creation of a flat roof garden, a space that restored greenery taken by the footprint of the building and gave residents a place to enjoy fresh air, sunlight, and views, all while turning the roof into a usable living area rather than wasted space. And in this way, the Villa Savoye became a pure expression of modernist principles, like a textbook written in concrete and glass. The house itself is roughly a square, about 27 meters on each side, appearing as a floating white cube with curved forms at the roof garden that soften the geometry. And the experience of moving through the building is carefully choreographed. Beginning as you enter the drive under the Pilates, curving gently into the garage, then rising along a ramp rather than a staircase to the main living area on the first floor, where an open-plan living room, terraces, and bedrooms flow together with simplicity and light. And from there, one continues upward along the same ramp to the roof garden, a space partly enclosed by sculptural curved walls and partly open to the sky, where views of the surrounding trees spread in every direction. And Le Corbusier designed this procession almost like a film sequence, with changing perspectives and framed views that made living in the house kind of moving architectural experience rather than a static one. Built with reinforced concrete, steel, and glass, Villa Savoye represented modern materials and techniques that allowed these bold new forms. And its interiors were minimalist, with built-in furniture, white walls, touches of bright primary colors, and an overall sense of clarity and openness that rejected the heavy, ornamented, tradition-bound houses of the past. Yet despite its radical brilliance, the villa also had serious flaws. Most notoriously, its leaky flat roof and water infiltration problems that plagued the Savoye family from the very beginning, with Madame Savoye writing frequent letters of complaint to the architect. And although Le Corbusier attempted repairs,
the issues never fully disappeared, leading the family to use the house less and less, until by the late 1930s it was practically abandoned. During World War II, the villa was damaged and used first by German occupiers and later by Allied forces. And after the war, it fell into further neglect, at one point being used as a hay barn by local farmers. A shocking fate for what is now considered one of the icons of modern architecture. And in the 1950s and 1960s, the building came close to demolition, as the town of Poissy considered redeveloping the site for a school. But architects, historians, and cultural figures from around the world, recognizing the house's importance, protested strongly. And finally, in 1965, the French government declared Villa Savoye an official historic monument, one of the first modern buildings to receive such protection. And this act of preservation marked a turning point in how modern architecture itself was valued as cultural heritage. In the decades that followed, restoration campaigns were carried out, especially in the 1980s and 1990s, to repair structural damage, stop leaks, and restore the house to its original appearance. And today, it is maintained by the French National Monument Center and open to the public as a museum, where students, architects, and tourists from all over the world come to study its forms and experience its spaces. Symbolically, Villa Savoye stands for the birth of the international style, a movement in architecture that spread across Europe, America, and the world, shaping everything from skyscrapers to suburban houses. And its influence can be traced in the glass houses of Philip Johnson, the steel and glass boxes of Mies van der Rohe, and countless office buildings and homes that adopted its vocabulary of Pilates, ribbon windows, free plans, and roof terraces. Critics, however, have also pointed out its contradictions, noting that while Le Corbusier promoted functionality, the villa's leaks and impractical aspects showed a gap between theory and reality, and that while he designed it as a model for modern living, the actual owners found it uncomfortable and stopped using it, raising questions about whether architectural purity should outweigh the everyday needs of residents. Yet even with these criticisms, its impact remains undeniable. Villa Savoye embodies the spirit of the machine age, the optimism of early modernism, the dream of creating houses that were rational, efficient, light-filled, and connected to nature, and its clean white forms, floating structure, and cinematic journey through space continue to inspire new generations of architects. Beyond architecture, it has become a cultural symbol, featured in films, photography, and art, representing not just a house, but an idea of modern life itself. And nearly a century after it was built, it remains as fresh, radical, and thought-provoking as when it first shocked visitors in the 1930s, proving that Le Corbusier's vision of a house as a machine for living could, in fact, become a work of timeless art. Today, Villa Savoye stands proudly in Poissy, France, welcoming thousands of visitors each year. What was once designed as a quiet weekend retreat for a wealthy Parisian family has transformed into one of the most famous monuments in the history of architecture. Nearly 100 years after its completion, the house still looks strikingly modern. Its white walls remain crisp and bold. Its thin Pilates give the illusion of floating above the landscape, and its ribbon windows continue to flood the interiors with light, proving that Le Corbusier's ideas have lost none of their freshness. For students of architecture, Villa Savoye has become a textbook written in concrete, glass, and steel. For everyday visitors, it is a reminder that buildings are not only shelters, but also visions of how humans can live in harmony with their environment. Le Corbusier's famous words go through every corridor of his house. The house is a machine for living in. At Villa Savoye, that machine did more than provide shelter. It became a piece of art. Each curve of the ramp, each framed view that is why this machine for living still inspires the world today.